Welcome back to the Masters of the Universe Classics Director's Commentary. Today we're going to do something different. Well, completely different. Instead of doing an action figure, we're going to be doing a set piece, more or less. We never thought we were going to be able to get to Castle Grayskull. I mean, obviously we were wrong. We'll address that later. But we did have a lot of respect for Castle Grayskull, of course, as a fundamental, quintessential part of the Masters of the Universe Classics world. And looking at ways to expand the brand, we were really in love with all of the different set pieces and objects that came with the castle back in the day. Everything from the blaster cannon, which usually went on top of one of the towers, to the training device that would kind of hang out below on the floor of the tower. A lot of these pieces, even long after the castle may have disappeared, tended to stick around in kids' toy collections just because they weren't as big, and they were usually one big chunk of orange plastic, like the throne here. And as we continued to explore different things from the castle that we might be able to do, since we couldn't do the whole castle, at least that was our thinking at the time, we even looked at floor pieces, or, could we recreate some of the stickers as 3D objects like the dungeon, which we know a lot of people wanted, or the trap door, or the flag. We looked at the cardboard cutouts, the computer, the robot. What would be a sort of piece of the castle that we could offer fans? And we also looked at non-castle things like the portal from Filmation. Would that make kind of a cool standalone piece? Or Skeletor's Bone Throne. Again, a cool piece. That one, though, would only really work with one character, and we wanted to find something that was going to work for, a broader sense of the line, if you will, which is what brought us back to Castle Grayskull. And since at that time we felt we would never be able to do a castle without a movie, so what could we do? And we wanted to find an object that fans were going to want to buy multiples of because, it would be fun and it would also help sales. So looking at all of those sort of self-imposed restrictions or, ideas, we really were drawn to something that would hold the weapons. And not just Man-at-Arms armor there, but really we kept coming back to the weapons rack. Since not only was that part of the vintage castle, but it was going to be functional for the line. It would actually help fans to organize their weapons, and they could hold them and not lose them, since we were giving characters multiple weapons and even doing weapon packs. So the Horsemen jumped right into this and designed one heck of a cool weapons rack, complete with all of the weapons from the original Castle Grayskull set that came with accessories. And we threw in some extra, which we actually recolored. The Horsemen had colored them all silver, and was it Bill at this time or Terry? It's hard to remember who was the designer on each piece. I think we were up to Bill at this time. So the weapon rack, obviously, was going to grow up, just like He-Man for the Classics line. And it was something that was done in many of the toy lines. Even, the the Mega Bloks line had a weapon rack in it. So reimagining the weapon rack for Classics, it obviously was going to get a little taller, and it was going to get more paint. The original one was just yellow, and it was going to hold a lot of weapons. You could really load it up if you wanted. And with all of the extra weapon packs that we were doing, there were a lot of extra weapons laying around, which meant it was going to work functionally, not just aesthetically. And you could give it to different factions. It wasn't just something that He-Man could use. You could give it to the Snake Men, or even the Great Rebellion, or the Horde. As I mentioned, the Horsemen did a new paint deco of silver with kind of a rusted wash on all of the weapons. We did change those. We changed some of the weapons to red, to like a metallic red, and this was done as an homage to the Man-E-Faces from the vintage line that came with extra weapons. I have no idea why they did this. Maybe they weren't selling enough Man-E-Faces and they felt this would be a way to sell more of him. I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't have any of that documentation. But a version of Man-E-Faces on the vintage line came with a whole spread of these kind of reddish, magenta weapons, different from his orange weapon that came with him. A lot of fans gave those weapons to the Wondar, Wonder Bread, Mail Away promo He-Man figure. You can see more about that in this video here. But the weapons definitely started with Man-E-Faces, and this was a cool way of getting them into the line, was by including them with the weapons rack, which of course looked beautiful in full wood paint with silver, rack knobs, well, I guess whatever you call them. And it worked great as a set piece. That was kind of the whole idea, was that you could start to bring to life your adventures and not just display figures, but you could have small set pieces around them. We thought maybe this would be the way to kind of slowly do Castle Grayskull. Of course, immediately fans wanted the other weapon rack, which was done as a cardboard sticker in the vintage line. This is a fan creation of what it might have looked like in classics. Still very, very cool, and it would have been awesome to do this, especially because we didn't actually even get to this piece with Castle Grayskull when we did it. But this is maybe what it might have looked like from a fan custom. So speaking of the castle itself, obviously, now that we're living here in the future, the castle did happen. We did make it. At the time of the weapon rack, this was a far-off dream waiting for a movie year, but it did manifest. It was created, and it was based very heavily on the original version of the castle that was seen in the mini-comics and in the prototype version, things like the extra ledge and the extra elongated jaw. So fans were the ones who made this happen. They stepped up, kind of HasLab style, and supported it as a pre-sale. And we really wanted to make this kind of the definitive Castle Grayskull playset of all time. And, there'd been a couple at that point. And pretty much everything else came with the castle. The ladder, the throne, the robot suit, the flag, the blaster. And obviously we didn't need to include the weapon rack because you might have already had that, so the weapon rack could just be put in there. We thought about including the weapon rack again, but it was just going to increase the cost, and we really were under the assumption that a lot of people already had it, and there was no reason to double down and give you another weapon rack when we'd already sold that as an individual item. Since, again, it came really fully loaded with a ton of stuff, including some accessories like that Batwing jetpack you see, which was from the prototype Castle Grayskull and did not come with the original one. Fans even have continued the bios and created a whole bio just for the weapon rack, which I have to say, I love the fact that the bios continue past me. That is fantastic. Anyone who can write classics continuity and keep it going, hey, it's great in my book. Love it. It just continues the world and makes more fun toys.